So it's time to do business. Welcome to Business Incorporated. We have 25 minutes to go around the world of business, and here's what we have prepared for you. Tanzania is doing well, adopting technology into its government activities and operations. President Ramaphosa is in the United Arab Emirates to boost economic ties. And in Egypt, more renewables are being adopted into operations. You're welcome to the program. I'm Ini John Mekwa, who starts the program, as usual, from the global oil space. Prices dipped on Monday after Iran had said that it had total control following weekend violence, easing some concerns of oversupply from the OPEC producer, while investors also weigh efforts to resume oil exports from Venezuela. So let's look at the numbers this afternoon. We see that it's red for both commodities. Price of Brent is at $63 after it lost 0.55%, while WTI also lost about the same percentage, 0.64%, and the price is at $58.73. Both benchmarks rose more than 3% last week, in their biggest of such rise since October, as Iran's clerical establishment stepped up its crackdown on the biggest demonstration since 2022 through protests that escalated over the weekend. The situation in Iran is under total control. That's what we hear from the foreign minister. He said that today, this morning, U.S. President Donald Trump is warning of action against Tehran should protests turn bloody, motivated by terrorists, he says, to target protesters and security forces in order to invite foreign intervention. More than 500 people are said to have been killed in Iran's civil unrest. And Trump is expected to meet senior advisors tomorrow, Tuesday, to discuss options for Iran, according to a U.S. official. While premium was formed in oil prices in recent days, the market is still underestimating the geopolitical risk from a wider Iran conflict that may affect oil shipments in the Strait of Hormuz. And this is according to the head of research at Ms. McKee. Outside oil, let's see what metals are doing. Gold prices broke through 4,600 per ounce level today for the very first time ever, while silver has also jumped to a record high, bolstered by geopolitical and economic uncertainties and growing bet also of U.S. interest rate cuts. And so we see the numbers. Spot gold went up 1.3%, $4,469.49 per ounce. U.S. gold 0.2% up at $4,591.10. Spot silver 3.5% in the green, $82.72 a barrel. Platinum also almost the same, 3.2% up at $2,345.40. Palladium 3.3% in the green, and copper seems to be the new baby on the block. A lot of investors are getting attracted to it. Since late last year, we've seen the price of copper jump and see it here again, 2.16% up at $6.20, 0.2 cents per ounce. So we know that driving most of this sentiment is that Federal Chair Jerome Powell saying that the Trump administration had threatened him with a criminal indictment over congressional testimony, an action which Powell has called pretext, is aimed at putting further pressure on the central bank to lower rates. And we know that President Trump is very, very passionate about lowering rates. And when we saw that news about Jerome Powell being investigated and indicted right there, well, also non-yielding assets tend to do well in low interest rate environments during geopolitical or economic uncertainties. A lot of investors tend to move over to the metals for a safe haven. Now, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is in the United Arab Emirates on an official working visit that's aimed at boosting investments, deepening bilateral economic cooperation, and promoting sustainable development partnerships between South Africa and one of its key Middle Eastern partners. Well, the visit, which runs from January 12 to 13, is at the invitation of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the president of the UAE, and coincides with the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week 2026. We know even President Bola Tinubu is there now, and it's a major international forum focusing on sustainable development and climate-related investment and opportunities. South Africa's bilateral trade with the UAE reached $5.22 billion in 2024, with South African exports rising over 5% compared to the previous year, underscoring the depth and potential of the economic relationship. South Africa also is still in the news. Apart from the president being in the UAE, their power system is also in the news. The national power system, that's ESCOM, continues to operate with stability and reliability, with ESCOM saying that it is well positioned to meet the rising electricity demand from economic activity in early 2026. ESCOM reported that the electricity grid remains resilient, and that's thanks to significant improvements across its generation fleet under the Generation Recovery Plan. The utility said that the system is ready to handle projected demand increases in the coming weeks. ESCOM's strategy has focused on disciplined maintenance, returning more capacity to service, and reducing emergency interventions, all of which bolster confidence in South Africa's energy outlook as the utility works to support economic growth. Away from South Africa, Tanzania has recorded a significant rise in exports to South Africa, and driven chiefly by strong demand for gold and a broadening range of Tanzanian products reaching the Southern African market. This is according to latest figures from the Tanzania Trade Development Authority. The report shows that Tanzania's export to South Africa nearly doubled over the past 5 years, increasing from around $1.145 million, that's about 2.82 trillion Tanzanian shillings in 2020, to about $2.29 million, approximately 5.7 trillion shillings in 2024. And that's a gain of roughly 2.84 trillion shillings. Gold accounted for the largest share of this export growth. Sales of the precious metal to South Africa jumped from about $1.07 million in 2023 to $2.226 million in 2024, highlighting the strengthened trade ties between the two neighboring members of the Southern African Development Community. And still talking about Tanzania now, Tanzania has been placed in the top tier of the World Bank's GovTech Maturity Index. It's GTM, talking about the government and how they adopt technology. And this reflects the country's growing strength in digital governance and the use of information and communication technology across government operations and public service delivery. The extensive GovTech bracket places Tanzania alongside other digitally advanced public sectors, including Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, and Egypt. It reflects the presence of scalable and connected digital platforms that support everyday government functions and interactions with citizens and businesses. The World Bank's GTMI is a global framework that assesses maturity of a country's government technology systems. The index groups them into 4 categories based on sophistication of their digital public infrastructure, service delivery platforms, citizen engagement tools, and supporting policy environments. Egypt has signed renewable energy agreement valued at $1.8 billion, marking a major milestone in the country's drive to expand clean power generation and strengthen energy security. The deals, formalized in the Suez Canal Economic Zone and witnessed by Prime Minister Mustafa Modobi, involve major international partners, including Norway's Scatec and China's Sungrow, and are designed to develop large-scale solar power projects and advanced battery storage facilities. Under the agreement, Scatec will construct a 1.7 gigawatt solar project in Minya Governorate, coupled with 4 gigabyte hours of battery storage to ensure stable, around-the-clock electricity supply. SunGrow will build a battery manufacturing plant in the Suez region to support both domestic and regional renewable energy initiatives. And back here in Nigeria, right before we go there, let's talk about Uganda. Uganda has recorded a dramatic increase in coffee exports, with shipments surging more than 60%, driven by a plentiful harvest and strong global demand. This is according to data released by the government and industry. The sharp rise in exports reflects robust output from key coffee-growing regions and sustained international market appetite for both Robusta and Arabica beans. Coffee remains one of Uganda's most valuable agricultural exports, underpinning foreign exchange earnings and supporting rural livelihoods across the East African nations. Uganda's performance also forms part of the broader growth in the country's overall coffee trade. In recent months, export revenues and shipment volumes have risen sustainably compared with previous years, reflecting the success to expand productivity capacity and market reach. And talking about Uganda, elections begin there on Thursday, and well, we intended to have a conversation on how the economy is holding up, with more than 1 trillion shillings already released for the elections. We do hope we can have our guests join us. But first, let's talk about Nigeria and the tax reform. It's a conversation that's alive in every gathering at this time. Anything that has to do with the economy is talking about the tax reforms. The controversies that have been thrown up. The latest, of course, was late last week, and we saw the reaction from Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. But now a group of individuals in Nigeria believe in this tax reform, and they had a meeting to share some of those gray areas, and they brought in panelists and experts to give a credence to that. If we'll take that report, and then we'll be back on the other side of Business Incorporated. Amidst questions and requests for clarity on the new tax law, January 9 Collective is holding a special lecture for its members and friends. They have also in attendance individuals who would be directly or indirectly affected.
The new tax law, recently signed by President Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, introduces significant reforms in revenue generation and administration. Its impact on businesses and our collective obligation will be a focal point of today's engagement.
The meeting is not unaware of controversies which have surrounded the new law.
Reforms such as these are necessary for progress, but they must be explained in simple terms, implemented with fairness, and felt in the daily lives of the people.
Despite the narratives and pushback circulating in the public discourse and social media, I encourage everyone here to embrace these reforms, ignore the noise, and focus on the opportunities this reform presents.
And this informs their choice of Chief Economist and Partner at SPM Professionals, Dr. Paul Alaje, for the keynote.
Success depends on implementation and trust. We need to ask state government and federal government questions. We need to ask questions. For all revenue collected, how will they be spent? Where will you spend them? And what are you going to do with them?
Even when you are further clarifying the gray areas is the responsibility of the panel, beginning with exemptions of value-added tax.
While the law has exempted you from filing VAT returns, there's still a voluntary compulsion that you can do. If you I like the scenario that you mentioned, that you want to file, or if you have the inclination that I am going to reach 100 million, then by all means you can proceed to file.
The first thing I see is
some of the panelists still have concerns.
If there is no clarity, then there's challenge.
This is a reform that we should continuously fine-tune to fit into our own circumstances. To the average Nigerian out there, once they hear the word reform, they want to run away.
However, manufacturers need no conviction on the benefits that the new law holds.
There is no manufacturer in Nigeria that is paying less than 63 taxes a year. It ranges between 63 to 120 in some states. So this tax law is a blessing to us because it brings it less than 10. And you can predict. One of the most terrible things for a manufacturer is to be unpredictable.
The conversation continues with the aim to balance different sides and perspectives and also address concerns of the impact of the new tax law. All right, so away from the tax now, let's see what's going on in the markets. Of course, we start from Nigeria, and we see that the positive sentiment has been retained from last week. Today, or at intraday, we see it at 162,680.80 after it gained 0.24%. For Johannesburg, it's very green, also 1.10%, and 119,410.30. In Egypt, it's also positive, more than 1% in the green, while Kenya closed on Friday negative 0.11%. Moving over to the Middle East, Dubai is positive, Abu Dhabi is negative, Saudi Arabia is positive, just 1% positive. That's for Saudi Arabia at 10,716.36. Qatar is also positive at intraday, 0.5% positive. Moving to the United States, stock futures we see fell because of that news about the chair, Jerome Powell, Department of Justice, opening that criminal investigation into the Federal Reserve chair. An apparent escalation, obviously, coming from President Donald Trump. And the market is not very happy about that. So we see it's in the red, 49,346. It's dropped 0.76%, and S&P also down. NASDAQ is also down. So American investors are not very comfortable with such a news that the federal Fed chair is being investigated. Well, we expect this, obviously, to spread over to Asia, closely related to that. South Korea's Kospi is, however, closed at an all-time high on Monday as Asia Pacific rose. That's for the Nikkei, the Kospi, the Hang Seng. All of them are doing good, and it's because of factors like robot maker Boston Dynamics, in which Hyundai owns about 80%. They announced a partnership with Google, DeepMind, to integrate into humanoids robots. So the robotics and the AI world moving the markets. We see even Shanghai and even up to India, which we expect their inflation number out today. And those are major drivers. Let's see if the investigation of Mr. Jerome Powell is also affecting investor sentiment in Europe. We have Lars Holter joining us. Hey, Lars, good morning. Welcome to the program. What's the color of your market?
Yes, hi, Ini. How you doing? It's good to be with you. I honestly can't say that the story about Jerome Powell has much of an effect here on European markets. It is, of course, a point of discussion because what we're seeing there is obviously of great concern to any investor and to anyone in markets because we are clearly seeing an attack on the Federal Reserve, a political attack, and that just fits that picture that we've been seeing for months now, for a year pretty much, ever since Donald Trump made his way back into the White House, where he fights the independence of institutions in the United States that need to be independent. And the Fed, of course, needs to be independent government to make an independent monetary policy. That helps the economy. That is important, Ini, of course. But as I said, it really doesn't affect us much here. We are seeing not too much movement in European markets. We're seeing Paris down a bit. We're seeing London down a bit. We are surprisingly seeing the DAX in Frankfurt up once again. And what a strong start to the year it's been for the DAX in Frankfurt, winning so far on all trading days of the new year. Who would have seen that coming after that sideways trading that we've seen for the latter half of the previous year? However, those gains that we're now seeing, Ini, they lead to some analysts warning investors not to go all too crazy. The market, they say, is way overbought from a technical standpoint. Much points to the market running too hot, and that would mean, of course, that at some point there should be a correction coming.
Yeah, correction coming, but I guess this time not driven by President Trump. But I mean, looking at other issues now, last week there was the approval of the EU-Mercosur trade agreement, and it's expected to be formalized this week. What's the state? What can we expect from this agreement?
Yeah, it's a rather complex story here. Let me tell you a little bit about what's been going on. The EU-Mercosur trade agreement, once it is signed and in place, which would happen later this week, this would create the world's largest free trade zone with more than 700 million people living in those affected countries. That is, of course, the 27 nations here in the bloc at the EU, as well as Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Trade between the two sides was worth some 111 billion euros in 2024, and the agreement will be quite significant in terms of tariff reduction, removing 4 billion euros worth of duties. Looking at what exactly is being traded between the two sides, the EU exports are dominated, of course, by machinery, by chemicals, and by transport equipment, including cars and trucks, of course. And Mercosur's exports are focused on agricultural products, minerals, as well as pulp and paper. Now, the agreement has been in the works for 25 years, believe it or not, and now it's about to be signed despite some major protests that have kept up throughout even the last few days.
Yeah, 25 years is a long time to wait. And yes, we are not able to win everyone, because I hear some people are still protesting against this.
Indeed, across the European Union, it was mostly farmers, the entire agricultural sector that has fought the Mercosur deal tooth and nail. Protests were, of course, biggest in France, but German and Italian farmers, as well as some in Ireland, are also up in arms. They fear major price pressure with these South American markets being able to ship more product across the Atlantic Ocean. And indeed, there is reason for them to worry. South America is an agricultural giant, and whether you're looking at the cattle ranches in Argentina or sugarcane plantations in Brazil, there is a lot of competition coming over meat, poultry, but also ethanol and other byproducts. It's also all produced cheaper than in the European Union, so it's no wonder, Ini, that farmers here see their livelihood threatened. However, the EU has, of course, renegotiated a few items in an effort to protect the agricultural sector here and actually reach agreement on the whole trade deal at some point. If now, for example, prices for any given product would drop by more than 8% due to this new product arriving here, the bloc can actually impose some select tariffs. Also, the EU is making available another 45 billion euros in agricultural subsidies.
All right, Salas, thank you so much. It sounds really interesting there, especially creating the largest free trade area, that could be recognized. So thank you so much for keeping us up to date on that.
Thank you, Ini. So
let's run over to what's happening with cryptocurrency. And while we see the price at 90,733.67, down almost 0.5% in 24 hours, talking about Bitcoin. And we see a lot of reds this morning. I don't know if to call it a struggling market. I believe we have Rume. Maybe Rume should tell us what's going on. Hi, Rume. I don't think I've spoken to you this year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to you, Ini.
What's happening to our markets? I mean, it's struggling, especially Ethereum. Ethereum can hardly hit 3,500, so far away from the 4,000 that we're celebrating last year.
All right, so I think the market is responding right now to the call by Jerome Powell saying that Trump is actually trying to mess him up with litigations here and there. So the market is actually responding to that this morning. The market hit uncertainty. Everyone is expecting that the market is we're going to be seeing a rate cut, not a situation where the President of the United States is going to be trying to lay criminal charges through the DOJ to Jerome Powell, which is the Fed chair. The market don't like that at all. But it's looking like we're going to be seeing what we, so to say in this part of the world as Masbos again from Donald Trump, because I think his goal is to make sure that Jerome Powell is actually disgraced out of office. But he's actually saying that his job right now is to maintain monetary policy and not anything to victimize the current president of the United States.
And his time is almost over. So I wonder why, there's a need for all of this. It's almost at the end of his tenure, I believe.
Yes, he will be leaving government by May. He served in various both Democrat and Republican president before, but I don't just know why the President Donald Trump is really heavy on him looking really bad before leaving office. The man is doing his job, and maybe the U.S. is trying to move towards that era in some countries of the world where the president determines who becomes the Fed chair. Aside that, and also on the printing machine.
Well, Ruben, the talk of independence, is everywhere, not just in Nigeria, neither is it just in Africa. But let's also remember that it was President Trump that appointed him. But anyways, thank you so much, Ruben, for sharing your views on that.
Thank you very much, Amy. It's my pleasure.
Okay, so we're at the end of the program now, but illicit crypto activity hit 158 billion last year. That's a big one, and UK is moving against crypto influence, celebrities and all of that. Those are stories we discuss a whole lot in 2025. Tether freezes $182 million in USDT tied to 5 Tron addresses. Those are the headline stories in the crypto space, and that brings us to the end of Business Incorporated today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. We'll do it again tomorrow, God's grace. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Bye-bye.